The Scotch by the government has announced revenue tax changes how will see high earners pay more than rather than in another place in the UK, and reduce earners pay less than. The nation's financial registrar, Derek Mackay, announced a new tax gang of 21p for such making more than rather than £24,000. The high bet of tax will be enlarged of 40p to 41p and the top bet of 45p to 46p. But a starter motor bet of 19p in the LB will as well be entered, Mr. Mackay affirmed in his project budgeting. Mr. Mackay told the Go will indicate no one making less than rather than £33,000 in Scotland will pay more than taxation. And he said the Scotch Parliament how such making over how drawing would just pay a proportional sum more than rather than they now do. Mr. Mackay as well set out a 3% pay growth for social segment workers making less than rather than £30,000, and a 2% growth for such making more than rather than how, in a cap of £1,600 for such making £80,000 or more than. And he incorporated a future £600 metre to ensure ultra-fast wideband to all space in Scotland by 2021. 21p new interim tax bet of £24,001 to £44,273. 19p starter motor bet of £11,850 to £13,850. 20p main bet of £13,851 to £24,000. 41p high bet of £44,274 to £150,000. 46p further bet of £150,000. The Scotch by the government was taking into account powers above revenue tax rates and bans recent year, in the new rates creature pay by nobody who lives in Scotland. Mr. Mackay had florid warnings of industry leaders and the Scotch Conservative Party front of his budgeting declaration how Scotland could not provide to be related in high tax rather than the otherwise of the UK. But other, consisting Scotch Labour and the Scotch Greens, had forced Mr. Mackay to go future. Mr. Mackay told how more than rather than two-thirds of revenue taxpayers will pay less than tax rather than they now do by his proposals, that will requirement to be adopted by MSPs upcoming in strength of April 2018. And he told 55% of taxpayers in Scotland will pay minimally less than following year rather than they would in the otherwise of the UK. The financial registrar insisted the changes, that he told would lift and further £164 metre, were required to alleviate UK budgeting intermittent, defend our NHS and some social services, supporting our economics and gear disparity in our community. He told the tax reforms would do Scotland's revenue tax framework though fairer and more than advanced. And he told a greater growth in the top bet of tax for such making more than rather than £150,000, that several opposition parties had named for, would in fact bring income as top earners would discover ways to escape profitable it. Amongst the some measures in the budgeting were, recite our on a glance manual to the key points of the budgeting there. Mr. Mackay's budgeting declaration was followed by the at first economical estimates of the new Scotch Financial Committee, that told the nation is cladding suppressed increase above the following 5-year. The freelance flash forecasted the Scotch economics will increase at less than rather than 1% per year before 2022, reduce rather than how forecasted by some economists. Its 5-year prediction suggests GDP increase will be 0.7% in both of 2017 and 2018, growing to 1.1% in 2022. It told the worldview was managed by sluggish performance increase and reinforced by demographics challenges. Scotch prudent financial representative Mick O'Mill stigmatized the create of a new main bet the native taxation. He charged the SNP of break a 2016 manifest pledge not to growth the main bet of revenue tax for such on low or medium incomes, and declared the actual cause was how Scotch economical increase is cladding over the UK. Scotch Labour lead Richard Leonard told the Scotch by the government's tax and conducting plans had tinkered circle the edges instead of performing drastic changing and supplying a true option to Tory strictness. Scotch Greens company convener Patrick Harvey told he was impressed how the reason for a more than advanced tax pattern appears to include one the date, but told Mr. Mackay should include lost future. And Scotch permissive Democrat lead Willie Rennie told the budgeting was a skipped prospect and does not do quite to encounter the length period as necessary in the economics. In another place, the Federation of Little Business Community told most of its members were versus revenue tax rises, and how the Scotch by the government was steering system the nation in unexplored economical water. The Scotch Chambers of Trade welcomed lot of the budgeting as creature favourable for industry, but reiterated its concerns on Scotland's new statute as the highest taxed portion of the UK. And regional by the government Flesh Cola told councils would go on to person very hard times in the next, in spite the more than measurable attitude by the Scotch by the government. The minority group SNP by the government will requirement to safe the supporting of at low one some side in procedure to ultimately undergo its budgeting, in the definitive voice due to be detained on February 19. Transactions in the Tories or Labour seems partly hardly, that foliage the Scotch Greens and permissive Democrats as capacity suitors, in the Greens the largest potential. It was the pro-fee independence Greens who rode to Mr. Mackay's save recent year, in a budgeting transactions eventually creature affected in February following almost 2 months of talks. At the period, Scotch Greens company convener Patrick Harvey vaunted it as the same largest budgeting trade-off in the story of degeneration in Scotland. It is potential he would be looking for acquiescence on a such, or though more, scope the period.